drugged every morning. Her eggs sold to billionaires. $500,000 each. She never knew.
I never imagined my life would become a science experiment. But as I lay there on the cold stainless steel examination table, staring at the irritating fluorescent lights above me, I knew something was terribly wrong. My stepmother, Seyeon, held my hand with that comforting smile she always had. That smile I used to trust blindly. "It's just another routine checkup, Hana," she whispered, stroking my hair. "You know how complicated your anemia has been lately. We need to make sure you're healthy for Christmas dinner next week." I nodded weakly, feeling that familiar dizziness taking over. It always happened. Every single time she gave me that special ginseng tea she claimed was from her grandmother's recipe back in Korea. I was only 14 when it started. Now at 16, I wondered why I still felt so exhausted all the time. Why my memory had so many black holes. Why there were tiny scars on my lower abdomen that I couldn't remember getting. The Christmas lights strung outside the clinic window seemed to mock me with their cheerful blinking. The clinic was located in Vancouver's Koreatown, hidden on the third floor of a commercial building between a K-beauty cosmetic shop and a Korean barbecue restaurant. There were no signs in English, only Hangul characters I could barely read. Through the frosted window, I could see the street below decorated with red and green garlands, a giant inflatable Santa wobbling in the December wind. Seyeon always insisted we come here instead of going to our regular family doctor. "They understand our culture," she'd say. "They know how to treat Korean women properly." My father never questioned it. He never questioned anything Seyeon said. Since my mother died when I was 9, he'd transformed into an empty shell filled only by the words and wishes of the new wife he'd brought from Korea 2 years later. This would be our 6th Christmas together as a family. I closed my eyes as the nurse prepared the needle. There were always needles. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night with abdominal pain so intense, I'd cry into my pillow, biting the pillowcase so I wouldn't wake anyone. Seyeon would appear then, as if she knew, with more tea, more pills, more promises that this was normal for developing girls. "Your body is changing," she'd say. "This is what happens when you become a woman. You'll feel better by Christmas, I promise." But there was something she didn't know. 3 weeks ago, right after our family trip to pick out our Christmas tree in Richmond, I had fainted at school during gym class. It wasn't like the other times. It wasn't just dizziness. I literally collapsed on the floor, and when I woke up, I was at the hospital. The real hospital, not the mysterious Koreatown clinic. And there, a doctor named Dr. Patterson ran some tests. Tests that Seyeon hadn't authorized. Tests that would reveal things that would make my entire world crumble right before the holidays. "Hana, sweetheart," Dr. Patterson said, her voice gentle but concerned, "when was the last time you had your period?" I blinked, confused. The truth was, I could barely remember. Maybe 6 months ago? Maybe longer. Seyeon always said it was normal to have irregular cycles. She made a note, then looked at me again. "Hana, your hormonal levels are extremely abnormal for someone of your age, and there are scars, very small, very precise surgical scars on your lower abdomen. Do you know of any surgeries you've had?" I felt my stomach twist. Surgeries? What surgeries? "The vitamins your stepmother gives you. Do you know what's in them?" I shook my head. She sighed deeply. "Hana, I need to run more tests, with your permission. You're 16 years old, so legally you can consent without your guardian for certain medical procedures in Canada. I think there might be something very serious going on here." The test took a week of careful lies, of hiding bandages from blood draws under long sleeves, of helping Seyeon hang Christmas stockings on our mantle while my heart pounded with pure fear. We went to the Capilano Suspension Bridge for their Canyon Lights display, and I smiled for family photos while feeling like my entire life was a lie. And then when the results came back, Dr. Patterson asked me to sit down. Her expression scared me first. She looked horrified. "Hana," she said, her voice trembling slightly, Do you know what ovarian stimulation is? I shook my head slowly. She took a deep breath. It's a medical procedure where hormones are used to make the ovaries produce multiple eggs, which are then surgically extracted. It's used in IVF or an egg donation. My heart started beating faster. That can't be right. My stepmother. She takes care of me. We're supposed to host Christmas dinner for my dad's colleagues. But even as I said the words, something deep in my mind started clicking. The monthly routine checkups, the missed periods, the constant exhaustion, the gaps in my memory. The way Se-Yoon always insisted on preparing my food personally, especially on days before appointments. The way she made me drink that special tea that left me so drowsy I could barely remember the drive to the clinic. There's more, Dr. Patterson said, quietly. We ran genetic markers, Hana. Based on what we found, we estimate you've been through at least 12 to 15 egg extraction cycles, possibly more. Each cycle typically produces between 10 to 20 viable eggs. If they were all fertilized and implanted, she paused, letting the impossible mathematics hang in the air between us.
23. That was the number that kept echoing in my head as I lay on that cold table in the Koreatown clinic 3 weeks later, with Se-Yoon holding my hand and Christmas music playing faintly from somewhere down the hall. 23 potential babies. 23 children who could be growing somewhere in the world, carrying my DNA while I didn't even know they existed. 23 lives created from my body without my knowledge, without my consent, without my permission? Somewhere, 23 families might be preparing for their first Christmas with a baby that came from me. But this time would be different. This time, I was awake, fully awake. Dr. Patterson gave me special pills that looked and tasted like Se-Yoon's vitamins, but were actually just placebos. I switched them, hiding the real ones in my school backpack, and when Se-Yoon gave me the ginseng tea this morning, right after we finished wrapping presents together, I pretended to drink it, pouring most of it into the lucky bamboo plant beside the kitchen table. I walked to the car like I was dizzy, letting my head loll, but inside, I was more alert than I'd ever been in my life. And I wasn't alone. Hidden in my hoodie was a small camera, the size of a button that Dr. Patterson helped me obtain, positioned perfectly to capture audio and video. Because Dr. Patterson told me something else, something that made my blood run cold. Hana, I found matches on the international black market. Your eggs, they're being sold to extremely wealthy families in China, South Korea, Singapore. Each batch goes for $500,000, sometimes more, if the buyer wants specific genetic guarantees. $500,000 per extraction. 12 to 15 extractions. I wasn't good at math, but even I could calculate that. 6 million, maybe 7, maybe more. All coming from my body while I thought I was just getting treatment for anemia. While I was picking out Christmas presents for a woman who'd been selling pieces of me. But this time would be different. This time, I was awake, fully awake. Dr. Patterson gave me special pills that looked and tasted like Se-Yoon's vitamins, but were actually just placebos. I switched them, hiding the real ones in my school backpack, and when Se-Yoon gave me the ginseng tea this morning, right after we finished wrapping presents together, I pretended to drink it, pouring most of it into the lucky bamboo plant beside the kitchen table. I walked to the car like I was dizzy, letting my head loll, but inside, I was more alert than I'd ever been in my life. And I wasn't alone. Hidden in my hoodie was a small camera the size of a button that Dr. Patterson helped me obtain, positioned perfectly to capture audio and video. Because Dr. Patterson told me something else, something that made my blood run cold. Hana, I found matches on the international black market. Your eggs, they're being sold to extremely wealthy families in China, South Korea, Singapore. Each batch goes for $500,000, sometimes more if the buyer wants specific genetic guarantees. $500,000 per extraction. 12 to 15 extractions. I wasn't good at math, but even I could calculate that. 6 million, maybe 7, maybe more. All coming from my body while I thought I was just getting treatment for anemia. while I was picking out Christmas presents for a woman who'd been selling pieces of me. But this time, today, I'd learn the full truth. Today, I'd record everything. And as I lay there feeling Dr. Kim's cold hands, if that was even his real name, preparing the ultrasound, I heard Se-yoon speak. Not to me, to someone else who'd just entered the room. A man in an expensive suit, speaking Mandarin. I'd taken Mandarin classes at school. I understood more than Se-yoon realized. "This is the final harvest before the holiday," the man said, his voice clinical and detached. "After this, we proceed with the hysterectomy, as discussed. $5 million for the complete reproductive system, organs intact. The buyers in Shanghai want it delivered before Chinese New Year. They're willing to pay premium for Christmas week delivery." My blood turned to ice. Hysterectomy? They were planning to remove my uterus? Sell it. Like I was being dismantled for parts. And they wanted to do it during Christmas week. Se-yoon's voice was calm, businesslike. And the girl? Afterwards? The man shrugged. I could hear it in his tone. Complications happen. 16-year-old with pre-existing anemia. Unexpected reaction to anesthesia. Very tragic. Very unfortunate. Especially sad during the holidays. The death certificate will be properly documented. Perhaps we'll say it happened on Christmas Eve. Very poignant. They were going to kill me. After they took my uterus, they were going to let me die on this table. And they were planning it for Christmas Eve, turning my father's favorite holiday into the anniversary of my death? My fingers tightened around the button camera hidden in my hoodie pocket, making sure it was still recording. Every word, every horrifying word. Se-yoon said, "The payment? It will be wired to the Cayman account as usual? I want to be in Seoul by New Year. Half upon extraction, half upon successful procurement of the additional organs. We have a buyer in Seoul interested in the liver as well. Young, healthy, compatible blood type. Another $2 million. Perfect timing for their New Year celebration." I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump off the table and run. But I forced myself to stay still, to keep my breathing slow and steady, to pretend I was sedated, because I needed more. I needed evidence that would destroy them completely. "You've done good work, Mrs. Park." I'd never heard anyone call Se-yoon that name. Park, not her married name. "Your operation has been one of our most successful. 23 successful births so far. All healthy, all delivered to premium clients. Some of those children are celebrating their first Christmas this year. You understand why we're willing to pay so much for this final procurement." "I always deliver quality," Se-yoon replied, and I could hear the pride in her voice. Pride in selling pieces of me, in selling babies made from my body. That's when I realized it. That's when the final, most horrifying piece clicked into place. Se-yoon hadn't just randomly chosen my father. She'd targeted him, researched him, found him when he was vulnerable, grieving, raising a daughter alone after my mother's death from cancer right before Christmas 6 years ago. She'd seduced him, married him, gotten legal access to me. All of it had been planned, from the very beginning. I was never a stepdaughter to her. I was inventory, a Christmas present she had given herself.
Dr. Kim is ready to begin, the Mandarin-speaking man said. "I'll observe to ensure proper protocols. My flight to Beijing leaves tomorrow morning. I'd like to be home for Christmas." I felt hands on my abdomen, cold gel being applied, the ultrasound wand pressed against my skin, and then Dr. Kim spoke for the first time, his voice tight with concern. "There's a problem." Se-yoon moved closer. "What problem?" "Her hormone levels aren't showing the expected response. The follicles aren't developed enough. It's as if she hasn't been taking the stimulation medication." Silence. Thick, dangerous silence. I could feel Se-yoon's eyes on me, could sense her mind working, calculating, suspecting. "She's been taking them," Se-yoon said slowly. "I watch her take them every morning. Every single morning. Even yesterday when we were baking Christmas cookies." "Then something is wrong," Dr. Kim insisted.
We can't proceed with extraction if there aren't viable eggs, and we certainly can't proceed with the full procurement if her system is compromised. The man in the suit made an irritated sound. This is unacceptable. We have buyers waiting, procedures scheduled, Christmas bonuses depend on this delivery. That's when I made my mistake. I shifted slightly, just a tiny movement, but enough. Enough for Se-yoon's sharp eyes to catch, to see that my breathing had changed, that I was too tense for someone who should have been heavily sedated. Her hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. Hard. "Hana?" Her voice was sharp now, all pretense of motherly concern vanished. "Hana, can you hear me?" I kept my eyes closed, but my heart was racing so fast, I knew she could feel my pulse thundering beneath her fingers. "She's awake," Se-yoon hissed. "She's been awake this whole time." Hands started searching me, rough now, no longer careful. They found the camera almost immediately, ripping it from my hoodie. The man in the suit held it up, his face dark with rage. "Recording device. She's been recording us." I opened my eyes then. No point in pretending anymore. Se-yoon's face was inches from mine, and what I saw there was worse than anger. It was cold calculation. She was already planning how to fix this, how to cover it up, how to make me disappear before anyone noticed I was missing during the busy Christmas week. "You stupid girl," she said softly, almost sadly. "You really should have stayed asleep. We could have made this painless. Now it's going to be messy, very messy. Right before Christmas, too." I found my voice, scratchy from disuse. "Dr. Patterson knows. She knows everything. If I don't check in with her in 1 hour, she's going to the police, with copies of everything. She's probably wrapping them up like Christmas presents right now." It was a bluff, sort of. Dr. Patterson did know, but we hadn't set up any check-in system. I'd been too focused on gathering evidence to think about an exit strategy. Stupid. So stupid. Se-yoon studied my face, then smiled. That same warm, comforting smile she'd used on me for years. The same smile she'd had when we picked out our Christmas tree. "Dr. Patterson at Vancouver General? The one who treated you after your fainting spell?" She pulled out her phone, scrolled, then turned it to face me. "This Dr. Patterson?" My stomach dropped. It was a news article dated 3 days ago. Local doctor dies in apparent hit and run. Dr. Rebecca Patterson, 43, was struck by a vehicle while leaving a Christmas party near Stanley Park. Police are seeking witnesses. 3 days ago, right after I'd left her office, right after our final planning session where we discussed what to do with the evidence. "You killed her," I whispered, "right before Christmas." "I protected my investment," she corrected. "Christmas is the busiest time for our business. Wealthy families want their miracles delivered for the holidays. Dr. Patterson was threatening millions of dollars in Christmas orders, and now we're going to proceed as planned." Although she glanced at the camera in the man's hand, "We'll need to be more careful about disposal. Maybe we'll make it look like a Christmas tragedy. Teenage girl overcome with seasonal depression. Very sad, very believable." That's when I started screaming, loud, piercing screams that echoed off the clinical white walls, drowning out the faint Christmas music still playing somewhere.
The man in the suit grabbed Se-yoon's arm. "This is too much risk. We need to abort. Forget the Christmas bonuses." "No," Se-yoon snapped. "We're too close. Just sedate her and—" The door burst open. Not quietly, not carefully. It literally crashed inward, and suddenly the room was full of people in windbreakers with RCMP printed in yellow across their backs. Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And at the front was a woman I'd never seen before, holding up a badge, her face grim despite the Santa hat pin on her lapel. "Nobody move. Hands where we can see them. Merry Christmas, you sick bastards." Dr. Kim dropped the syringe. The man in the suit actually tried to run, but 2 officers tackled him before he made it 3 steps. Se-yoon just stood there, her face frozen in shock, watching her carefully constructed world collapse during what should have been her most profitable week of the year. The woman with the badge approached me gently. "Hana Park, I'm Detective Chen. You're safe now."
We've been tracking this operation for 6 months. Best Christmas present we could give these victims.
6 months? But how did you know to come now? Dr. Patterson, she's... Detective Chen's expression softened. Dr. Patterson didn't die in a hit and run, Hannah. She's alive and well, testifying as we speak. We faked her death to make them feel safe, to make them proceed with today's procedure. We needed them on record making the transaction with you present as evidence. She held up a tablet, showing multiple video feeds. We've had this clinic under surveillance for weeks. We have everything. Every transaction, every buyer, every victim. We're calling it Operation Christmas Miracle. Saved 14 girls just in time for the holidays. Victims. Plural. There are others? Detective Chen nodded grimly. You're the 14th girl we've found. The youngest is 12. The oldest was 19 when they couldn't extract from her anymore. She didn't make it to Christmas last year. She didn't finish that sentence. She didn't have to. As they led Seyan away in handcuffs, my stepmother looked at me one last time. And do you know what she said? Do you know what her final words to me were, right there in the doorway with a wreath hanging just above her head? You were supposed to be grateful. I gave you purpose, value. You would have just been another mediocre girl living a mediocre life. I made you worth millions. I made you matter. Some of those babies are having their first Christmas right now because of you. I watched them take her away, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no relief. Just a hollow emptiness where my childhood should have been, where my Christmases should have been filled with actual joy instead of a drugged haze. But the story doesn't end there. It never ends where you think it will. A week later, on Christmas Eve, sitting in a victim support counselor's office decorated with a small artificial tree, I learned the full scope of what Seyan had built. It wasn't just a black market egg trafficking ring. It was an entire network spanning 5 countries, with doctors, lawyers, and government officials all taking their cut. My eggs had gone to some of the wealthiest families in Asia. Tech billionaires, real estate moguls, political dynasties. People who wanted premium genetics for their designer babies. People who wanted to open the perfect Christmas present, a child with guaranteed exceptional DNA. And those 23 children? They were real. Living, breathing human beings who had half my DNA. The authorities were trying to track them down, but it was complicated. Many of the families had used intermediaries, some had left the country, some were threatening lawsuits, claiming they were innocent buyers who didn't know the eggs were obtained illegally. Their lawyers argued they were just parents who wanted to give their children the best Christmas gift possible, life itself. My father came to see me on Christmas Day. He looked like he'd aged 20 years in a week. Our living room was still decorated. The tree we'd picked out together still stood in the corner, presents underneath that would never be opened. "I didn't know," were his first words. "Hannah, I swear on your mother's grave, I didn't know." And the horrible thing was, I believed him. Seyan had played him as expertly as she'd played everyone else. She'd been the perfect wife, the concerned stepmother, the devoted caregiver. She'd isolated him from his friends, from our extended family, had made herself the center of his universe until he couldn't see anything she didn't want him to see. She even volunteered at his company's Christmas party every year, making everyone believe she was the perfect Korean wife. "I should have protected you," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I'm your father? I should have known. I should have seen. Instead, I was planning to give her a diamond necklace for Christmas while she was planning to sell your organs." But Seyan was that good. That's what made her so dangerous. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a woman who found a way to make millions by exploiting a legal gray area and girls too young to fight back. She looked like someone who baked cookies and wrapped presents and sang carols while systematically harvesting human beings. The trial was a media circus, the Christmas baby broker, they called her.
News vans camped outside our house in Richmond. Reporters shouted questions every time I left, asking how it felt to have my childhood stolen, to have my body used as a factory. My face was everywhere, usually with a black bar over my eyes to protect my identity, but everyone at school knew when we returned after winter break. Everyone knew I was the girl whose stepmother had been selling her eggs on the black market.
Some people were sympathetic. Others were cruel in the way only teenagers can be. How does it feel to have 23 bastard babies celebrating Christmas? Someone spray painted on my locker. At least you're good for something, another note read. I didn't go back to school for 2 months after that. During those 2 months, I spent most of my time in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand who I was now. Was I still just Hannah? Or was I Hannah the victim? Hannah the girl with 23 biological children? Hannah the cautionary tale? The media kept calling me the girl who didn't know, as if my ignorance was the most defining thing about me. As if the fact that I was drugged and violated and harvested for years was less important than the fact that I hadn't figured it out sooner. My therapist, Dr. Lindstrom, a kind woman in her 50s with graying hair and warm brown eyes, tried to help me reframe it. You were a child, she'd say, during our thrice-weekly sessions. You trusted an authority figure. You had no reason to suspect. The blame belongs entirely to Se-Yoon and her network, not to you. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two completely different things. I kept circling back to the same questions. How could I not have known? What kind of person doesn't notice their own body being used like that? What did that say about me? The other girls in the support group struggled with the same things. We'd meet in a beige conference room at the community center, sitting in a circle of folding chairs that squeaked whenever someone shifted nervously. There was Minji, the 12-year-old, who barely spoke, who'd been in the program for only 6 months before we shut it down. Her mother had been the one who'd sold her. Her own mother, who needed money for gambling debts. There was Sarah, 19, whose ovaries had been so damaged by the repeated extractions that she'd never be able to have children of her own now. The doctor said it was like she'd gone through menopause as a teenager. There was Priya, 16 like me, whose aunt had actually been a recruiter who'd kidnapped her from New Delhi when she was 13. Each story was worse than the last. Each girl carried her own particular flavor of trauma. But we all shared certain things. The nightmares, the gaps in memory, the feeling of our bodies being foreign territory we couldn't quite trust anymore. And we all shared the knowledge that somewhere out there, children existed because of us. Children we'd never meet, never know, never have any relationship with despite being their biological mothers. Dr. Lindstrom explained it to me once, the psychology of it. Your eggs were taken without consent, Hannah. Those children, while they carry your DNA, are not yours in any meaningful sense. You didn't choose to create them. You didn't carry them. You didn't give birth to them. They're being raised by other families. The biological connection doesn't make you their mother. It makes you their victim. There's a difference. But my brain couldn't quite accept that distinction. Biology felt too powerful, too permanent. Those 23 kids had half my genes. They might have my eyes, my hair texture, my predisposition to certain diseases. They might be musical, like my mother had been, or scientifically minded, like my father. They were part of me, whether I wanted them to be or not. When I finally returned to school in late February, everything felt different. The hallways seemed narrower, the fluorescent lights harsher, the casual cruelty of teenage social dynamics unbearable. People stared, some whispered. A few girls from my old friend group tried to act normal. But I could see the discomfort in their eyes, the way they didn't quite know what to say to me. How do you make small talk with someone whose stepmother was arrested for selling her eggs on the black market? What do you say? Hey, sorry your uterus was almost harvested. Want to grab Starbucks? There was one person who surprised me, though. Marcus Chin, a guy I'd known peripherally since freshman year. Someone I maybe spoken to 3 times total. He sat down next to me at lunch one day, uninvited, and just started talking about his AP chemistry homework like nothing had happened, like I was just another person, not a walking tragedy. I was so startled, I actually laughed, and it was the first real laugh I'd had in months. After that, he kept showing up, sitting with me at lunch, walking with me to class. never mentioning my situation unless I brought it up first, but always there, just being normal in a world that felt anything but. "Why are you doing this?" I asked him one day in March, as we sat on the school's front steps waiting for my dad to pick me up. I'd lost my driver's license privileges after a panic attack behind the wheel. Marcus shrugged, squinting into the afternoon sun. "My older sister went through something bad a few years ago. Different situation, but she told me that the hardest part wasn't the thing itself. It was how everyone treated her afterward. Like she was broken. Like she was defined by what happened to her. She said she just wanted someone to treat her like she was still herself. Still a person with interests and opinions and a life beyond her trauma."
Felt tears prickling my eyes. "Your sister sounds smart." "She is," Marcus said. "She's at UBC now, studying social work. She wants to help other people who went through similar stuff." He glanced at me. "You don't have to be like her, though. You don't have to turn this into some kind of mission or purpose or whatever. You're allowed to just survive it. Be angry about it, not make it meaningful. That's valid, too." It was the first time anyone had given me permission not to be inspirational, not to find the silver lining, not to transform my suffering into something redemptive, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. But as winter turned to spring, new complications emerged. The prosecution needed me to testify at Se-Yoon's trial. They wanted me to take the stand in front of a courtroom full of people, in front of cameras and journalists and sketch artists, and describe in detail what had been done to me. They wanted me to identify medical instruments, to confirm dates, to look at photographs of my own drugged, unconscious body on that examination table and verify that yes, that was me. That was what they did to me. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Miss Kowalski, who worked for the Crown prosecution, tried to prepare me. "The defense is going to try to discredit you," she explained during one of our prep sessions. "They're going to suggest you knew what was happening, that you consented, that you were complicit, that you benefited financially from the arrangement. None of that is true, but they're going to say it anyway. You need to be prepared for that." I felt sick. How can they say I consented? I was 14 when it started. I was drugged. I didn't even know it was happening. "I know," Miss Kowalski said gently, "but Se-Yoon's defense team is expensive and desperate. They're going to argue that the medical procedures were legitimate treatments for your anemia, that you knew about the egg donations and agreed to help infertile couples, that you received gifts and money in exchange. They've already submitted evidence of expensive presents Se-Yoon bought you, claiming those were payments you accepted. The presents, the laptop she'd given me for my 15th birthday, the designer backpack, the new phone. I thought those were just normal stepmother things, attempts to bond with me, but she'd kept receipts, documented everything, building a paper trail that made it look like a transaction instead of trafficking. The trial started in April. I had to sit in the courthouse hallway, waiting to be called, watching other witnesses go in and out. I saw Dr. Kim handcuffed and being led by marshals. I saw the man in the expensive suit, Chen Wei-ming, whose lawyer spoke perfect English with a British accent and who kept insisting his client was just a medical equipment salesman who had no knowledge of illegal activities. I saw people I didn't recognize. Other doctors, lawyers, facilitators, all part of Se-Yoon's network. And then one day I saw something that made my blood run cold. A couple, Chinese, probably in their 40s, well-dressed and terrified-looking, being escorted into a different courtroom. The woman was carrying a small child, maybe 2 years old, a little girl with dark hair and eyes that were shaped exactly like mine. I couldn't breathe. That was one of them. One of the 23, right there, 20 feet away from me. My biological daughter, being held by someone else, someone who'd paid $500,000 for eggs they didn't know were stolen. I watched them disappear into the courtroom, and I had to run to the bathroom to throw up.
Miss Kowalski found me there, sitting on the floor of the courthouse bathroom, hyperventilating. "That was one of them.
I gasped. "That little girl, I saw her. She looked like me. She looked exactly like me." "I know," Miss Kowalski said, sitting down beside me on the cold tile floor, not caring about her expensive suit. "The prosecution subpoenaed several of the recipient families. They need them to testify about the transactions, to prove the money trail. I should have warned you. I'm sorry. Are there more? Are there more of them here?" She hesitated. 3 families total, with 4 children between them. "Hannah, you don't have to see them. We can arrange for you to testify via video link, or we can schedule you for a day when they're not here." But I couldn't look away from the door. Somewhere in this building, 4 children who were biologically mine were sitting in courtrooms with their parents, all of them caught up in this nightmare. Those parents had thought they were doing something beautiful, creating families through modern medicine. Now they were caught in an international trafficking case, their children's origins exposed, their parenthood questioned. Some of them were fighting deportation. Some were facing charges themselves, though most would eventually be cleared as victims of fraud. "I want to see them," I heard myself say. "All of them. I need to." Miss Kowalski looked worried. "Hannah, I don't think that's a good idea for your mental health." "I don't care about my mental health right now. Those kids exist because of me, because of what was done to me. I need to see them. I need to know they're real." So she arranged it. Not directly, nothing that would violate court protocols or create legal complications. But she made sure I knew when those families would be in the building, which courtrooms they'd be in, where they'd be entering and exiting, and I watched. I stood in hallways and sat in public seating areas, and I watched my biological children walk past. The 2-year-old girl I'd already seen, a 4-year-old boy with my father's nose and my mother's delicate bone structure, twin infant girls, maybe 8 months old, being carried by a couple who looked absolutely devastated. 4 children, 4 lives that shouldn't exist, or maybe should exist but shouldn't be part of this horror story. 4 kids who'd someday be old enough to understand what they were born from, how they came to be, the violation and trauma at the root of their existence. When it was finally my turn to testify, I walked into that courtroom with my head up. I'd lost weight, I knew. My clothes hung loose. I had dark circles under my eyes from insomnia, but I was determined to tell the truth no matter what. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, uncomfortable benches for spectators. Se-Yun sat at the defense table in a gray suit, her hair pulled back neatly, looking nothing like the woman who used to braid my hair and make me ginseng tea. She looked professional, composed, almost sympathetic. The perfect victim of overreach by an overzealous prosecution if you didn't know what she actually done. When our eyes met, she smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, sad curve of her lips that seemed to say, "I'm disappointed in you." And I felt myself shrinking, felt that old urge to apologize, to make her happy, to be the good stepdaughter who didn't cause problems. Years of conditioning don't disappear just because you logically know someone is a monster. But then I saw my father in the spectator section. He looked 10 years older than he had 6 months ago. His hair had gone completely gray, but he was there, sitting in that courtroom every single day, supporting me. And I saw Marcus, too, who'd skipped school to be there, and Detective Chen, and Dr. Patterson, who was alive and well and had testified earlier about the medical evidence. I took a breath and raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor, a man named Mr. Nguyen, started with easy questions. My name, my age, my relationship to the defendant, how long she had been married to my father. Then he moved into harder territory. The vitamins, the tea, the medical appointments, the gaps in my memory, the symptoms I had experienced. "Can you describe how you felt after drinking the tea Miss Park would prepare for you?" "Drowsy, like I couldn't quite think straight. Everything felt fuzzy around the edges, and I'd usually fall asleep pretty quickly after." "And did you ever question why this tea made you so drowsy?" "She said it was normal, that ginseng and other herbs could have calming effects, and that my body needed rest because of my anemia." "Did you have anemia, Miss Park?" "No. The doctors at Vancouver General confirmed I never had anemia. My blood work was always normal when they tested it after my collapse at school."
Sayan's lawyer, Mr. Davidson, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, objected. Speculation. The witness isn't qualified to interpret medical tests. Sustained, the judge said. But the point was made. Mr. Nguyen moved on. Can you tell the court about the first time you became aware that medical procedures were being performed on you without your knowledge? I described my conversation with Dr. Patterson, the scars on my abdomen, the hormone tests, the genetic markers indicating multiple extraction cycles. I kept my voice as clinical and detached as I could, describing my own violation like it was a science experiment, which in a way it was have. Then it was Mr. Davidson's turn for cross-examination, and that's when things got ugly. Miss Park, you testified that you were unaware these procedures were taking place. Is that correct? Yes. And yet, you went willingly to these appointments, month after month, year after year. You never protested, never refused, never told your father you didn't want to go. Isn't that true?
I thought they were medical appointments for my anemia. Yes or no, please. You went willingly. I felt trapped. Yes, but thank you. And you accepted expensive gifts from my client. A laptop computer, a designer backpack, a smartphone, correct? Those were just presents. Presents totaling over $3,000. That's quite generous for a stepmother you claim was abusive, wouldn't you say? Objection, Mr. Nguyen said sharply. Counsel is badgering the witness. I'll rephrase, Mr. Davidson said smoothly. Miss Park, did you ever attempt to refuse these gifts? I didn't know. So you accepted them willingly. Thank you. Now let's talk about your relationship with your father. Would you say he was attentive, involved in your life? Where was he going with this? Yes, he's always been a good father. So if something was truly wrong, if you were truly being harmed, you could have told him at any time, correct? I didn't know I was being harmed. I was drugged. But you never told him you felt strange after these appointments? You never mentioned the drowsiness, the memory gaps. Why not? Because I trusted Seyun, because she told me it was normal, because I was a child and I didn't know any better. A child, Mr. Davidson repeated. You were 14 when this allegedly began, certainly old enough to know if something felt wrong, old enough to speak up, old enough to say no. I felt tears starting to form. She was drugging me. I couldn't consent when I was unconscious. But you consented to the tea. You consented to the appointments. You went willingly, time and time again. My client maintains that you were fully aware these were fertility treatments, that you agreed to help infertile couples, that you were being compensated through gifts and privileges. Isn't it possible, Miss Park, that you simply regret your decision now? That you're embarrassed by what you did and are trying to blame my client? That's not true! I was crying now. I couldn't help it. She was selling my eggs without my knowledge. She was planning to kill me. Allegedly, Mr. Davidson said calmly, according to conversations that may or may not have been accurately recorded, according to your interpretation of events. But we only have your word for that, don't we? Mr. Nguyen objected again. The judge sustained it, but the damage was done. The defense had planted reasonable doubt, had made me look like a girl who'd participated willingly and was now trying to reframe it as victimhood. When I finally got off the stand, I was shaking so hard I could barely walk. My father met me outside the courtroom and just held me while I sobbed into his shoulder. They made it sound like it was my fault, I choked out. Like I knew, like I wanted this. Anyone with a brain can see that's not true. You were 14 years old. You were drugged. You were violated. None of this is your fault. None of it. But doubt had been planted in my mind too. Had I been too trusting? Too naive?
Should I have questioned more? Should I have refused the tea, refused the appointments, insisted on seeing a different doctor? The rational part of my brain knew that was victim blaming, knew that the only person responsible was Se-yoon. But the irrational part, the traumatized part, kept circling back to, what if?
The trial lasted 3 more weeks. Witness after witness, medical experts testifying about the procedures, financial experts tracing the money, other victims describing similar experiences. The prosecution built an overwhelming case, but the defense chipped away at it, creating little pockets of doubt, suggesting alternative explanations, painting Se-yoon as a misunderstood entrepreneur operating in a legal gray area rather than a criminal trafficking children. In the end, the jury deliberated for 2 days. 2 days of waiting, of checking my phone constantly, of barely sleeping, of imagining every possible outcome. And then the verdict came back. Guilty. On all counts. Trafficking, assault, fraud, conspiracy. The evidence had been too strong, the pattern too clear, the other victims too numerous. Se-yoon showed no emotion when they read the verdict. She just stood there, perfectly composed, as if she'd already known this would be the outcome. As they led her away, she looked at me one last time. And this time there was no smile, just cold assessment, like she was calculating something, planning something. Even going to prison for 35 years, she looked like someone who still had cards to play. That look haunted me for months afterward. What could she possibly be planning? She was going to prison. Her network was dismantled, the money had been seized, her co-conspirators were all facing their own trials. What else was there? But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that Se-yoon had one more move to make, something none of us had anticipated. I was right. 3 months after the sentencing, I received a letter. It came through my lawyer because Se-yoon wasn't allowed to contact me directly, but she'd found a loophole, written the letter to her own lawyer, who then forwarded it to mine, who then had to decide whether to give it to me. Ms. Kowalski called me into her office. "You don't have to read this," she said, holding an envelope like it might explode. "You can tell me to shred it right now, and I will." But I needed to know, needed to understand what Se-yoon possibly had left to say. So I took the letter, hands trembling, and read. It was handwritten in her neat, precise script, and what it said changed everything all over again. "Hannah, I know you hate me. I know I think I'm a monster. Perhaps you're right, but there's something you need to know, something I've kept hidden because I thought it would be kinder that way. But you deserve the truth. Those 23 children aren't all strangers. 3 of them were created from your eggs and your father's sperm. I preserved some of his samples years ago, from before his vasectomy. The one he didn't tell you about. The one he got right after your mother died because he couldn't imagine raising another child without her. 3 of those children are your full biological siblings, not just genetic material sold to strangers. They're your brothers and sisters, and they're living with families who believe they came from anonymous donors. I thought you should know. I thought you deserved to understand the full scope of what I built. You're not just connected to those children as a donor. 3 of them are your actual family. Think about that. Live with that. You're welcome. Se-yoon." I sat there staring at that letter for what felt like hours. 3 of them. 3 of the 23 weren't just biological children created from my eggs and stranger sperm. They were my full siblings, my brothers or sisters or some combination. Created without either my or my father's consent, grown in other women's bodies, raised by other families, but actually truly related to me in the most fundamental way. When I showed my father the letter, he collapsed, just literally fell to his knees in the middle of Miss Kowalski's office. "She's lying," he kept saying. "She has to be lying. I didn't." But Miss Kowalski made some calls, got access to more medical records, and discovered that yes, Se-yoon was telling the truth. My father had gotten a vasectomy 18 months after my mother's death, and Se-yoon, somehow, had obtained sperm samples before the procedure. Maybe she'd bribed someone at the fertility clinic where the samples were stored for reversal purposes. Maybe she'd stolen them during one of her supportive wife visits. However she'd done it, she'd used them to create embryos with my eggs, and then sold those embryos at an even higher premium. Matched sibling sets probably commanded top dollar.
Somewhere in the world, I had 3 full biological siblings that I'd never meet, never know, never have a relationship with. And my father, who'd made the conscious decision not to have more children after losing my mother, now had 4 living children, whether he wanted them or not. Se-Yun had violated both of us in ways that went beyond what we'd even imagined. That letter was her final blow, her way of making sure we'd never truly heal, never truly move on. Because now, every time my father looked at me, he'd think about those 3 other children. Every birthday, every holiday, every family moment would be shadowed by the knowledge of what we'd lost, what had been stolen and scattered across the world. But here's what Se-Yun didn't count on. Here's what she got wrong in her final, calculated cruelty. She thought that letter would destroy us, thought it would be the thing that finally broke what was left of our family. Instead, it gave us purpose. My father and I, with Miss Kowalski's help, started a foundation, the Hannah Park Foundation for Reproductive Justice. We advocated for stricter regulations on fertility clinics, mandatory reporting systems, better protections for egg donors, and legal rights for victims of reproductive trafficking. We lobbied for laws that would make it easier to track illegal operations, that would provide better support for survivors, that would protect other girls from going through what I went through. And we began the long, complicated process of trying to locate those 3 siblings. Not to disrupt their lives, not to claim them or insert ourselves into their families, but just to know, to document, to preserve the possibility that someday, if they wanted to, if they chose to, they could learn about their origins and maybe find their way back to us. It's been 2 years since the trial now. I'm 18, graduated from high school, starting college in the fall. I'm studying bioethics and law because I want to understand the systems that failed me, want to learn how to fix them. Marcus and I are still friends, though he's at a different university studying computer science. The nightmares are less frequent now. The panic attacks are manageable. I can hear Christmas music without completely falling apart, though I still don't celebrate the holiday. And I've learned to live with the knowledge of those 23 children out there, 23 lives that are connected to me in ways both profound and meaningless. They're not my children. I didn't raise them, don't know them, have no parental relationship to them whatsoever. But they exist because my DNA was stolen, and I can't change that. All I can do is try to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Sometimes I imagine what they look like now. The 2-year-old from the trial would be 4. The twins would be walking, maybe talking. There might be others I don't even know about, other extractions that went undocumented, other embryos sold to families in countries we couldn't track. Somewhere in China, Korea, Singapore, maybe even here in Canada, pieces of me are growing up, learning to read, starting school, celebrating birthdays, living ordinary, extraordinary lives while having no idea where they truly came from. And somewhere, 3 of them carry not just my DNA, but my father's. 3 children who are my full siblings, who will probably never know I exist, who will never know they're part of our family. That's the cruelest part. Not the stranger's children, but my actual brothers or sisters, scattered and lost forever. But I'm not powerless anymore. That's what I learned through all of this. Se-Yun tried to reduce me to biological material, tried to make me into nothing more than valuable genetic components to be harvested and sold. But I'm still here, still alive, still fighting, still speaking. My name is Hannah Park. I'm 18 years old. I'm a survivor. And I refuse to let what happened to me be the end of my story. It's just the beginning.